Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our fourth bootcamp entitled Multicurrency and Electronic Payments, Market Opportunity or Back Office Headache. My name is Brian Bonkowski, and I'm the Managing Director of ROI Payments. The focus of this webinar is to hopefully increase your payments IQ. The agenda today, we'll go into a quick introduction. We'll then dive into who's interested in payments in today's day and age. We'll then review why multi-currency may be a good opportunity for you as a business to increase your market share and or increase your revenue. We'll then go into a deep dive as far as what options are available in the market to fulfill your multi-currency needs, both from a technical perspective as well as from an acquiring and banking perspective. We'll then jump into back office requirements, then considerations for the various options that we're presenting, provide you an overview of a matrix of the providers available, and then jump into what's next in our upcoming bootcamp. So, why multi-currency? Despite strong growth, North America's share of the global sales will drop to 33.5% last year to 21.5% in 2013. The steady growth, however, is coming from the Asia-Pacific regions, as well as in Latin America and in Europe. What this means for you as a U.S.-based company, now this webinar is focused specifically on U.S.-based companies looking to do multi-currency processing outside of the U.S. And expand into other markets. What this means for you is the ability to potentially localize your product or service into a local region, not necessarily just from a language perspective, but from a currency perspective, may increase your adoption rates and increase your market share. Now, again, this is focused specifically on U.S. merchants and U.S. businesses. European businesses have for a very long time, been exposed to various types of currencies, cross-cultural issues, international banking practices, multiple languages, as have the acquiring and issuing banks. So European companies are much better suited to provide a multi-currency platform for their customers to process online, whereas U.S.-based companies, it is a bit of a black box. We are trying to figure out what those black box is as part of this webinar and see if that market opportunity may be a good opportunity for you. Now, bear in mind the stats that you see presented here are for U.S. And international e-commerce from a consumer standpoint, business-to-consumer e-commerce, actual goods being sold. There are no statistics available for business-to-business services, software as a service type offerings, even though that does seem to be a number of the people on this call. This should be used more as a baseline to do your projections going forward. Now let's get into a bit more specifics from a regional perspective. Again, specific to e-commerce, business to consumer. The source for these statistics is the Penton Research and Cambridge Mercantile Group. One thing that jumped out at me when looking at this slide as the biggest issue across the board seems to be in foreign currency translations and in the FX. You see the conversion rate for UK citizens that are leaving USD-only site to calculate the daily rate and then potentially going back to that site or losing the sale altogether. The UK is also the most prolific in this list as far as active online shoppers, with 62% of the population in the UK being active online shoppers, 40% in Australia, 38% in Germany, and 28% in Canada. The bottom line is the more mature the e-commerce market and the more mature the user base, the more likely those individuals are to go outside of a website to go look up a currency. The more savvy they are, the more opportunity you have to potentially lose the business if you're not offering that product in a localized capacity. Now, though there are only a handful of countries reported here, the trends do present an opportunity for localization and for local currencies. Basically, if I'm going to a website in the U.S. and I see that the product is offered in pounds or GBP or euro or what have you, I'm more than likely going to leave that site as well, either to look up the currency, but more than likely I'm going to try to find that site locally and with a denomination that I am comfortable with and I understand the value in. So now let's review the various options for multi-currency for US-based online businesses. We see there are 4 opportunities. The first being the most simplistic, the last local acquiring being by far the most advanced. Now, based on the size of your business and your expected monthly processing in that region, we would suggest one of these 4 tools. Again, the first one being an option and an opportunity to display what the local currency exchange rate would be for that item, but actually processing it in USD. The second is presenting your item or your service in a localized currency and then translating that back to a consolidated USD account. The third is presenting in a local currency but settling that transaction back into a multi-currency account here in the US. The last would be a local acquiring option, which is an entire look and feel and smell as you are a local merchant. There are higher levels of complexity with local acquiring. You're required to set up a local entity to process. So we typically don't recommend that sort of setup unless you're processing at least $1 or $2 million a month, because it may not be worth the back office headaches, the cash management, as well as the burden on your finance department. Now let's review the specific tools and the various costs associated with them, the opportunity, the customer experience, and the relative complexity. Now this box in the upper right-hand side here, you'll see this presented in all 4 options. As far as the dynamic converter tool, this is a display-only opportunity. So you see in the example 1, select your currency as a drop-down. These prices are still remaining in USD. It's just presenting the display of what that relates to in that local currency. It's not actually converting the FX at all. This is a very simple tool to deploy. A number of e-commerce shopping carts do support this type of environment, but again, you're not going to have any increase in acceptance in that region. The customer experience is still going to be that of a foreign transaction, but again, the complexity is incredibly low. The next option we see here is a dynamic currency conversion. This is growing in popularity, especially in the online goods, digital goods, and software as a service business space. It's a really very good stepping stone to get into the more advanced multi-currency options. It's a good way for organizations to test the waters of currency, to test out a market. If you have some flexibility as far as your margins are concerned, we recommend this as a good initial step. Basically what's happening here is you're presenting in a localized currency that at least looks like it's going to be processed locally for in euro, for instance, but the funds are actually settling back to you in USD. From a back office perspective, it's relatively simple because everything's coming back into your USD account. You're only maintaining one merchant ID, and all the funds are settling to one US bank account in USD. The disadvantage is because of this convenience, the foreign translation and the currency conversion that you'll be paying is going to be dramatically higher than the other samples. So the third option is US-based multi-currency. There are a handful of providers providing this functionality today, including First Data, Elevon, and Chase Payment Tech. All of these organizations have local banking entities around the world, which is how they're able to basically aggregate these payments and then settle them back to you in the US. The advantage here is you do not have to set up an entity in the various countries you're going after. Another advantage is you're going to have the FX and the foreign currency charge is going to be significantly less than a dynamic currency conversion. The disadvantage is you will have to set up local bank accounts in each of the currencies that you're supporting and figure out from a cash desk perspective how to handle and maneuver those funds. The last option is true local acquiring. This is where you set up an entity in another country, you acquire that transaction locally, and you settle those funds into a local account. This can be difficult from an entity perspective. There may be some tax implications, as noted here, from a disadvantage. But the real opportunity here is for a true global company to be able to market to your customers in how they would transact with a local merchant. So if your competitors are local to your customers, this would be a way for you to be right on par with them as far as an acceptance level. Now, we've gone through a number of options here, 1 through 4. This is by far has the highest acceptance rate because the cards issued in those various countries, because you're acquiring that transaction locally, the acceptance rate is going to be virtually 100%, as opposed to the other options. All the other options, you're acquiring those transactions in the U.S. Now, for technology and gateway options, you just have to be mindful, basically, that your shopping cart and e-commerce provider can accommodate multi-currencies, as well as a number of currencies and a number of languages have different levels of foreign characters. So be mindful of that when you're choosing your shopping cart. As far as a gateway goes, at ROI, we separate gateways into 2 major buckets, those being SMB gateways, primarily Authorize.net, PayPal's VeriSign gateway, as well as a handful of others that are USD focused. They may have some decent tools for US customers, but all of those funds are going to be settled in the US. In fact, most of these gateways can't even support Canada. The more enterprise gateways, there are only a handful that can actually accommodate this level of functionality. True multi-currency, handling multiple merchant accounts. So in options 3 and 4, US-based multi-currency as well as local acquiring, you'll be required to set up merchant IDs in those various regions for number 4, and additional merchant IDs in the US for those different currencies you want to present for number 3. So a number of gateway platforms have the ability to set up a master merchant account or master mid, and then sub-merchant accounts or sub-mids based on currency or geography. So be mindful of that when making your gateway selection. The last point there, in terms of Gateway Plus acquiring, there are a number of providers that are popping up. Global Collect being one of the most advanced in the area of melding the PSP model with integrated acquiring as well as gateway. So basically, you have in essence one contract with one provider. And that provider then can do the acquiring as well as the technology and gateway end. This can be more expensive, but for certain types of companies, it is often a very good option. As far as a vendor matrix, the long and the short of it is this can get very complicated. As noted in some of our previous boot camps, a number of these providers blend the lines of acquirers, processors, and technology. So it's just important to be mindful of what markets you'd like to go after, what your volume is today, what you expect your volume to be in the future, as well as the technical capabilities of your team and the back office capabilities of your finance team. With regard to back office requirements, the web converter tool, which is the first tool in our stack here, there are virtually no back office requirements because you're presenting and settling those funds in USD, even though you're showing what the converted currency would look like in their local currency. As far as DCC, dynamic currency conversion, goes, there are some back office considerations there. You will need to or want to track additional data per transaction. So you'll need to record what the day's exchange rate was, what you're being charged as an exchange rate, as well as potentially if there are tax considerations for that transaction as well. Many of our customers who have used DC and then have eventually gone public have had their auditors come back to us and said, okay, well, what was the FX rate that was charged for this specific transaction on this specific date? And if you are a company that is subject to audit, that is going to be a significant consideration for you. For US-based multi-currency, option 3, the ability to facilitate those currencies and to potentially offset the currencies that you're taking in payments with vendors or payouts that you need to make, and hedging those against where you feel the currency is going. As far as local acquiring is concerned, option 4, there are significant back office requirements and considerations in these implementations. Typically, when you're a company of that size, you have multiple entities. You're typically dealing in a back office intercompany type of transaction, and being mindful of how to best allocate resources to accommodate these intercompany transfers is a significant consideration. That last point there, chargeback and refunds, really applies primarily to dynamic currency conversion. When you're charging in a specific currency and getting an exchange rate and then going back and giving somebody a refund at that exchange rate, oftentimes the exchange rate is going to be different, so your customers may end up getting a refund and or be issued a chargeback at a different level, which may not be the best customer experience. Pricing strategies. The idea here is to be able to look in arrears at each transaction. So strategies for dynamic currency conversion would be to be sure to price your product in line with where your FX strategies are and where you see the risks are from an FX gains and losses perspective. Tracking each transaction, the exchange rate, against your cash desk, and coordinating with your finance folks to be sure you're offering a product that is in line with the fluctuations of the currency can be a daunting task. Again, if you're a software company or digital goods company, you may have some more leniency in terms of margin, and you need to weigh that against your market opportunity for going after that specific customer in that specific region. A number of lookalike companies are popping up, especially in Europe and in Latin America, providing the same types of services, business services, and recurring subscription type services that are offered in the U.S., but they're offering it in a localized currency and offering it in a localized setting, and it's chipping away at the market share of a number of our customers. So being mindful of your market opportunity and hedging that against the potential risk of the fluctuating currency needs to be a consideration when going after prices. So what is next? In our next webinar, we will be discussing alternative payment methods. Once you have gone down the road of offering your product in a different currency, it is incredibly imperative that you're mindful of the different parameters around alternative payment methods, especially in Europe and in Asia Pacific, which are growing e-commerce markets and growing business-to-business markets. A lot of the payment methods are actually direct bank transfers and third-party payment schemes that you may not have heard of that are imperative to your success as an organization. I'd like to take the time to thank you for joining this webinar, and I hope it was useful for you. This will be recorded and available on our YouTube station as well as online on our website, so feel free to reference this and send it to your friends and family. Take care, everybody. Cheers.